Tonight, bin strikes could still be on the cards. One of the biggest unions is set to reject the latest pay offer.
Also making the headlines, a mother shares her pain after her daughter's murder on Arthur's Seat.
We have had our lives ripped apart and been brought to our knees with our unimaginable pain and grief.
Plans for controversial Loch Lomond Resort should not go ahead, says the planning authority for the national park.
And in sport, after a drubbing at Celtic Park, Rangers fans vent their anger at players and management. I'm Kellyanne Woodlands in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. STV News has learned workers in some Scottish councils could take strike action, with the biggest local government union set to reject the latest pay deal. It raises the spectre of cleansing strikes yet again, and even school strikes in some areas.
The result of the ballots of Unison members hasn't yet been released, but STV News understands they will reject the offer. The GMB have already accepted the deal, while Unite members are still voting. Well, our reporter Lewis Mickey has been following the story. So, Lewis, what more can you tell us?
Well, Unison won't get the final result of this consultative ballot until later, but what we do know is that at the moment around about 85% of local government members are rejecting this pay offer from COSLA. Now, this is a pay offer around about 3.6% backdated to the start of April, and this is an offer that was designed in order to try to avoid strikes amongst cleansing workers. The GMB union, who are also involved, they've accepted last week. Meanwhile, the third union involved, Unite, they have their ballot closing on Thursday, but they've also recommended that members accept.
So what could this mean for strikes then?
Well, strikes could still certainly go ahead. Ultimately, Unison haven't got a deal in place if this is rejected, which means their mandate for industrial action still stands. And that's a mandate that goes across 13 different council areas, many of which are in the Central Belt. It includes Clackmannanshire, East Ayrshire, the Lothians and Fife, Glasgow, Inverclyde, North and South Lanarkshire, and Stirling. Now, they also have a mandate for strike action in schools across 5 different council areas, and that includes Perth and Kinross, which is the constituency of the First Minister, John Swinney. So what's next? Well, tomorrow Unison bosses will meet to decide what they're going to do next, but certainly this isn't over yet.
All right, Lewis. Well, thanks very much for bringing us up to date with all of that. Thank you.
The mother of a woman who was murdered by being pushed off Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh says the family's lives have been ripped apart by unimaginable pain and grief. It's 3 years to the day since Fawzia Javed from Leeds was killed by her husband.
A memorial has now been unveiled. Campaigners hope it will help keep the focus on preventing violence against women. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
On the 3rd anniversary of her daughter's murder, Fawzia's mum came to the scene of her death for the first time. Through the gloom of a wet and misty day, there were positive reflections on how she'd been a beacon of light in many people's lives. But there was also acknowledgement of the horrendous ordeal her family have been going through.
It feels so surreal and like a horrific nightmare that I'm going to one day wake up from. I still cannot get my head round what's happened, and I never will. 3 years ago this evening, Fawzia and her unborn baby lost their lives in the most horrific and brutal way. We have had our lives ripped apart and been brought to our knees with our unimaginable pain and grief.
Fawzia, who was 31, had been visiting Edinburgh with her husband in September 2021. At the time, she was 17 weeks pregnant. He'd been subjecting her to domestic abuse and coercive control. She'd been planning to leave him when he pushed her 50 feet to her death. Kashif Anwar was convicted of her murder and is now serving a life sentence.
We had Kashif, who was never ever going to tell us the truth, and Fawzia, whose voice and ability to tell us what had happened, Anwar thought he could take away. But he didn't manage that. Despite his actions, Fawzia had the strength to hold on and tell what had really happened to her, and that changed everything for us.
As she lay dying, Fawzia had managed to tell a walker and a police officer that she'd been pushed. Crucial evidence in securing the conviction.
In life, Fawzia's connection with Edinburgh was only fleeting, and it ended on the side of the hill just over there. Her family hope this bench will be a permanent link between her and the city, and a reminder of a life lost to male violence.
We must commit into raising our children not to be abusers. We must educate our boys, our men, our fathers, our brothers, because this isn't enough to teach our daughters how to be safe and how to survive. We must create a culture where women are safe in their homes, safe in their relationships, and safe in their communities.
Fawzia had previously made complaints about domestic abuse to police in West Yorkshire. 2 reviews are currently looking at whether enough was done to protect her and what lessons can be learned. Today's ceremony ended with a minute's silence, but a determination the voices of others facing similar abuse won't be ignored. Gordon Cree, STV News, Edinburgh.
A crime boss and his associate boasted the potential profits of his global drug trafficking operation would be life-changing. Jamie Stevenson and 5 others were back in court as the prosecutor outlined the scale of the plot in which cocaine was shipped from Ecuador, hidden in banana boxes.
The judge, who will sentence the men next month, was given details of the inner workings of the smuggling ring and how it was smashed open. Here's our chief reporter, Sharon Fruit.
This was the 18th consignment of bananas from Ecuador, labelled for delivery to Glasgow Fruit Market. When UK border officials in Dover searched inside the boxes, they found 119 foil packages. Each contained 8 blocks of cocaine. The drugs had a street value of around £76 million. Last week, Jamie Stevenson, nicknamed the Iceman, admitted directing this global operation. Today he was back in the dock as prosecutors revealed the scale of this crime. Stevenson's right-hand man was Lloyd Cross, who ran a vehicle recovery business. He used his trucks to collect and deliver cash to fund this cocaine operation. On Valentine's Day 2020, around 7 months before the seizure at Dover, Jamie Stevenson was seen by Spanish police meeting fruit merchant David Bilsland in a hotel in Alicante. Bilsland was used to give the operation an air of legitimacy. He allowed his business to be a front and was in charge of the logistics with port authorities and others. The High Court heard David Bilsland was then removed as the company's director, and he was replaced by a person described as a vulnerable individual in England who was duped into handing over his signature and documentation. His identity was then registered in that role. To communicate, the gang used the EncroChat phone network. When French authorities cracked into the system in April 2020, Scottish investigators had the evidence they needed. Stevenson sent a message saying how he'd bought the Wee Guys company before sending a photo of the Glasgow Fruit Market website. In another EncroChat message, the 59-year-old and his associate discussed the wages expected from this arrangement. The texts boast, "That fruit job is the prize," and they describe it as life-changing work. Stevenson also admitted being in charge of a street Valium pill factory, which the court heard could churn out 250,000 tablets per hour. Paul Bowes and Ryan McPhee were recruited for this operation alongside Stevenson's stepson, Jared Carbon. Police raided the pill factory in June 2020. Jamie Stevenson was arrested on the same day in Glasgow. Jared Carbon sent messages via EncroChat to have all his stepfather's devices wiped. Stevenson was detained but then granted bail and fled. He was rearrested in February 2021 while out jogging in the Netherlands. All 6 involved in this operation will be sentenced next month. Sharon Frew, STV News, at the High Court in Glasgow.
Scottish Conservative members will start voting for a new leader this week. Ahead of that, the 3 candidates will clash in a Scotland Tonight debate later here on STV. Our political editor Colin Mackay is hosting.
This is the first time the three leadership candidates, Russell Finlay, Murdo Fraser and Megan Gallagher, have faced each other on TV. These encounters can be brutal. Remember the SNP leadership debate last year on STV? That was the defining point of the campaign and gave us the phrase, "continuity won't cut it." I'd expect a similar message tonight after the Scottish Conservatives got just 13% of the general election, their worst ever, and the acrimonious resignation of Douglas Ross. Certainly all the candidates are promising change. And at the party's internal hustings, they don't actually face each other or debate each other. They get questioned separately by members. Tonight, they'll face questions from each other, from me, and from STV viewers. So this could be the toughest test yet for the candidates. On Scotland Tonight at 10:40.
Meanwhile, the race to become the party's UK leader is also gathering pace. Two frontrunners, Kemi Badenoch and James Cleverly, launched their campaigns to take over from Rishi Sunak on the day MPs returned after the summer break. Well, our Westminster correspondent Paris Gurtsianis is also back. So Paris, what have the candidates been saying?
Well, it's good to be back, Kellyanne. Perhaps less so for the Conservatives, who launched an inquest today into why their election campaign went so badly. Kemi Badenoch used her launch to say the Tories were too left-wing in power and suggested British citizens should get homes and school places ahead of immigrants. James Cleverly blamed a lack of party unity and talked up his record as Foreign and Home Secretary. There are 6 candidates in total. Tory MPs will begin whittling that down this week.
And Paris, there have also been developments in the UK's response to the conflict in Gaza. What's the latest?
Yes, so there's been growing pressure, including from the Scottish government, to suspend arms export licenses over claims that the Israeli army is breaking international humanitarian law in Gaza. Earlier, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, announced a suspension of 30 export licenses for things like aircraft components and targeting systems, but hundreds more licenses will remain. And of course, it's the United States that exports by far the largest share of Israel's arms.
All right, Paris, from Westminster, thank you.
Other stories, and all under 18s who were previously detained at Polmont have now been moved into secure care settings. It comes after new laws came into force last week preventing any new admissions of children into young offenders institutions. The Scottish Government says the changes will ensure well-being and rehabilitation are taken into consideration while continuing to keep communities safe. The Flamingo Land development at Loch Lomond should not go ahead. That's the view of the planning authority responsible for the Lomond and Trossachs National Park. 150,000 objections have already been received for the proposals at Ballach. Vidushi Tiwari reports.
It's been branded the most unpopular planning application in Scottish history. A £40 million development, including a monorail, water park resort and lodges.
They'll all boom, but the locals won't get anything out of it unless they work for it.
I don't know, it's been like that for years, nobody bothers. People take their dogs for a walk. If you can create a couple of jobs, why are in?
I think we don't have the infrastructure to cope with it, and we've got a lovely natural environment here that we really don't want to lose.
I think for people like us who are small local businesses, it's going to take away any natural foot traffic, any natural visits from tourists in the area, because they're all going to be staying on site.
Supporters say Flamingo Land would be a boon.
Look at the public realm in this area. It's in poor condition. It's not being maintained. Some of it is non-existent. The beach has no sand. It's at the moment a cost to the public purse. It would change from it being a cost to being an asset. There'll be knock-on effect as well, because the people who will stay here will go into Ballach and will travel around the community and they will spend money.
But campaigners fear it'll be to the area's detriment, diverting traffic away from Ballach's small businesses.
So we already suffer from over-tourism. Any economy is a very fragile ecosystem, and this development will flip it in the wrong direction. They've had 3 attempts. They've come back 3 times with 3 different planning applications, and they've actually, their third application is worse.
This is publicly owned land, currently publicly owned under the stewardship of Scottish Enterprise, and it's about to be sold eventually to a private developer. In what other country in the world would it state it had a national park, but a national park that was prepared to sell its very own land to a private developer?
The plans have received over 150,000 objections. Supporters say they're based on misinformation.
They're coming in to use the natural capital of the area. Of course they are. But it's not in their interest to destroy it the way some of the people in the Green lobby irresponsibly and stupidly have been saying.
Plans for Flamingoland were first submitted in 2018, but it's been a game of push and pull ever since. Earlier this year, councillors backed the development, saying it would be a step away from other major resorts, but it's faced intense opposition at every step. The Parks Authority will have its final say on the 16th of September. As the debate on its future continues, one thing's for certain: people can continue to enjoy the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Vidushi Tiwari, STV News in Balloch.
All right, sport with Jamie now, and you've got all the reaction to yesterday's Old Firm match.
Yes, Kellyanne, and plenty to get through.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Autumn Sale.
Good evening. Brendan Rodgers says there's more to come from his Celtic players, even after hammering Rangers 3-0 in the first Old Firm derby of the season. Meanwhile, Philippe Clement is calling for patience from the Ibrox fans after they fell 5 points behind their rivals. Tempers spilled over at Ibrox after the match, with fans confronting the manager and the team. With more, here's Ronnie Charters.
It was the tale of two teams on Derby Day in Glasgow. Celtic relentless, Rangers rudderless. A 3-0 win for Brendan Rodgers' men, mounting the misery on their Glasgow rivals. And for the captain, Callum McGregor, it should have been more.
Excellent, I thought, performance, quality goals, quality defending, the way the team worked for each other, had a bit of everything, and probably unlucky not to actually get more goals. But like I said, built on a strong foundation. Boys working ever so hard for each other, and then that quality, especially on transition, was first class.
Despite a fast start from the visitors, Celtic were dominant. Rangers with a let-off after an offside, preventing the hosts taking the lead. But it only delayed proceedings as the champions swept their rivals aside with 3 clinical goals. Dyson Maeda, Kyogo and McGregor all on the score sheet. Add to that, the sold-out Celtic Park crowd got to see a couple of their new faces, with Arnie Engels and Luke McCowan making their debuts. For Brendan Rodgers, excited by the energy and potential of the squad he's built as they move 5 clear of Rangers.
You just sense before the game started there's a great energy in the crowd, and that's what you want your team to bring. So I think they're enjoying watching the team, the quality of the game, and yeah, it's but there's still such a long way to go. But all you can do is make the first step in a positive way, and the players clearly have done that.
For the Ibrox club, an entirely different tale. Another derby where players were accused of a lack of fight and hunger, and another derby where Philippe Clement failed to win. But from the Rangers manager, a plead for patience.
It's a really big blow to lose 3-0 against Celtic. For all of us, for the fans, it's not something that you want. I think also we didn't reward ourselves in that way. It could have been a 3-2. The best is by far yet to come with this squad.
It hurts. It's not what we want. It's not what we believe our club's about. You have the beauty of being able to hopefully go back to Ibrox again soon and being back with the fans and hopefully kicking on and putting this behind us.
But for the Rangers supporters after the match, they were in no mood to put anything behind them. Angry fans confronting the squad as they returned from Celtic Park, with security having to intervene. The league may now halt for 2 weeks for the international break, but it's safe to say this resultant performance may take a lot longer to forget for Rangers fans. Ronnie Charters, STV Sport.
Stephen Naismith says he can turn around Hearts' form after a 6th straight defeat, while Hibs boss David Gray says Kilmarnock's injury time equaliser was tough to take. Dundee United sent Hearts equal bottom of the Premiership table with a second-half winner, piling the pressure on Naismith. At Rugby Park, Joe Newell had given Hibs a spectacular opener before Bruce Anderson converted a late penalty, with Killie boss Derek McInnes hailing his team's determination to secure a share of the spoils. John McGinn says his Euros disappointment will never leave him and believes it's time for a fresh approach from Scotland ahead of their Nations League campaign. The Scots host Poland in their opening match at Hampden on Thursday, with several new additions made to the squad following their group stage exit in Germany. Back together, the familiar faces and the new. But it's been a tough few weeks of reflection for Scotland since being knocked out of the Euros early, wounds that will take time to heal.
These things never leave you. Everyone always says the highs in football make the lows worth it, but they're lying. So it'll always be in the back of your head, things you could have done differently, both together as a team and individually, so we can't change that now. It's about looking forward. There is new faces, and it's about trying to freshen things up and do something different, and all of us need to improve both on and off the park.
Scotland compete in the top tier of the Nations League for the first time. Poland, Portugal and Croatia are the opponents over the next 3 months. A tough slate of games in which to try and bounce back from their dismal exit from Germany.
What we can't do is we can't keep going back to it now. We've got an unbelievable group ahead of us, some fantastic games, and we've got the preparation for the World Cup, because the preparation for me now starts, which is why there'll be a few fresh faces in there, which is important. So we've looked at every part of the world, part of the globe, to see which players could come in to take us forward.
Meanwhile, Dundee goalkeeper John McCracken has replaced the injured Robbie McCrory in the squad. Finally, Scotland's Stephen Maguire has won gold in the individual boccia at the Paralympics in Paris. The 40-year-old from Hamilton, competing in his 4th Games, overcame Colombia's Adilson Chica 8-5 to claim the top prize in the French capital. Maguire joins Scottish swimmer Stephen Clegg in winning a gold medal at the 2024 Paralympics. And Scotland's Nathan McQueen is about to get underway in the final of the Para-Archery Mixed Team Compound Open in Paris. That is all your sport for this evening.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Autumn Sale.
Well, the weekend was nice while it lasted, which wasn't long. Sean's here to tell us what's coming.
A dry start to the day will become increasingly splashy. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
A very good evening to you. My goodness, of course, August was extremely wet, exceptionally wet in some spots, and then today we've had a good couple of weeks worth of rain in some spots from those torrential downpours. So we haven't started September off too well. However, things will get a little bit better as we go through the week. We'll get to that in a wee second. But for tonight, it should become largely dry. Most of the rain clearing away to the north. Temperatures down to around a cool 8 degrees by the end of the night. Now, tomorrow we've got more rain on the way, but it'll be nothing compared to the heavy bursts we had earlier on today, but it is still going to be quite a damp day. Probably the best of any brighter weather in the morning. Temperature-wise, tomorrow afternoon, about 14 to 16 degrees, so on that cooler side, but better weather Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. And here's the reason why. Low pressure is going to be setting itself up across France and Spain. So that's where some of the worst of the rainfall will be. Very unsettled conditions around, probably towards the end of the week here, and also across England and Wales. For us, we've got high pressure building to the north, which does mean the weather should be a bit better. So Wednesday, a lot of dry weather with sunshine, especially further west we go. In that sunshine, feeling quite nice with light winds as well. 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. Temperatures could even be a bit higher Thursday and Friday, maybe up to about 17 or 18 degrees. So again, feeling nice in the sunshine. So more rain to get out of the way tomorrow before we get to that better weather later on the week. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Oh, don't forget, Colin will have that head-to-head TV debate with the 3 candidates vying to be the Scottish Conservative leader.
From all of us here, thank you for watching. Good night.
Good night.